Hello, and welcome to an impromptu live stream in which we're going to discuss what's the word I'm looking for?
Hot button topic.
A very hot button topic. Yes, very hot button topic. I'm of course Pizal, and with me tonight I've got from the Idle Chatter podcast, Andrew. How's it going, buddy?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight.
Not a problem. Always fun.
You know, always fun. You may remember Andrew from, of course, the Idle Chatter podcast, and he's hung out with me on these streams on my channel a couple of times, and he's been a guest on the Sausage Factory a couple of times as well. So always fun hanging out with you.
You as well, sir.
Cool. And with me tonight as well from the Obnoxious and Anonymous show, also a frequent contributor to the Sausage Factory, Cameron. What's going on, Cameron?
I am having a relaxing Friday night, and you contacted me and said, let's talk about this topic, and I said, yes, this is what I've been waiting for. I need to vent. I need to talk about this with people who know this subject inside and out as well as I do. So if you guys are watching, you're in for a real treat tonight.
Absolutely, yeah. Should be a lot of fun. Should be, like you said, it's a hot button topic. It is, for those of you who don't know, who I guess have been living under a rock since last Monday, the news broke, and it nearly broke the internet, that John Carpenter is returning to the Halloween series to act as executive producer and creative consultant on the 11th Halloween film. Miramax Films, Trancas, and now Blumhouse Pictures, the new player in the game, somehow managed to pool enough money together to make it worth John Carpenter's while. And I'm sure somebody will be mad at me for saying that, but we'll move on. So yes, it's happening. John Carpenter is back with the Halloween series, at least as executive producer and creative consultant,
and might be composing.
Oh yes, I keep forgetting about that. He's also supposed to be doing the musical score for the film, which is actually, that's got me more excited than him producing, because I mean that's at least the score will be cool. At least
well, before we get into the topic, let's let people know that what a producer or executive producer is on a movie. It could mean anything. It could mean he's there every single day giving notes, doing this, doing that, or it could be that they paid him a lot of money to have his name on the credits. I mean, some executive producers never even, step foot on the set once. Maybe they walk into the editing bay for one day, and give some notes. So it's hard to know how much involvement he's really going to have, and we're not going to really know that until we get some more announcements about it. So.
Well, and that was something I was actually going to bring up in my video, which I did a full video a couple of days ago, just talking about the whole thing and all the hoopla and stuff. A semi-controversial video, I guess you could say, which is why I kind of wanted to follow it up with this live stream with some good horror fans to talk about the topic. But I actually wanted to mention in the video, and it totally slipped my mind, the late 90s, early 2000s, all those Wes Craven Presents movies, you know what I mean? It kind of reminded me of that too, where he probably produced a lot of those movies and had no clue that his name was even on them. But they would be marketed as, Wes Craven Presents,
He would know, because he would get a nice check.
Well, he'd get a check. Yeah, he got a nice check, I'm sure. But, that sort of in-name only producing credit to just really promote, to use the name as a promotional tool kind of thing, that immediately came to mind as well.
Well, remember, you would get the Wes Craven Presents Dracula 2000, right? And that was like a major draw because at that time people didn't know Patrick Lussier as a director. They knew him as the editor of some of Wes Craven's movies. But when it said Wes Craven Presents Dracula 2000, I know a lot of people who went to see it because they thought Wes Craven directed it. I remember being tricked in the 90s when it said Wes Craven Presents Carnival of Souls, and I was like, oh my God, he's, you know, he got behind a new remake of Carnival of Souls. He had nothing to do with that movie. He just, they paid him a check, he slapped his name on it, and that was it. So
they Spielberged up the 80s and the early 90s too, with, you know, Steven Spielberg's name was on everything.
Oh yeah. If you see Spielberg's name as an executive producer on a TV show, run, because it's always horrible. You know, and I guess maybe Amazing Stories, but he actually was a creator of that one. But you know, most of them, you know, it's just like, are you kidding me? You know, he had nothing to do with that stuff. You know. So.
Yeah. And you know, I had to preface this in the video that I made. I'm not knocking John Carpenter, and I don't think any of us will knock John Carpenter for accepting a paycheck. He absolutely deserves it. And I mean, he even, you know, he has such a sort of dry, pragmatic approach to all of his old movies that are now considered classics. I think it was Guillermo del Toro was just, he had put out this just barrage of tweets.
I loved
just
it.
On how great John Carpenter was and how all of his movies were, you know, cult classics, and you know. And Carpenter's response was just very much like, well, yeah, basically, you know, I'm glad you guys like those movies, but they don't do me any good now. I mean, they weren't hits in their day, and you know, so, I mean.
And almost every single one of his movies has been remade in the last 10 years, and that's basically because he's allowed them to remake them. They're not taking them away from him. He's giving them permission. He's getting paid for it. And I want to make it very clear, Piz, that you're not being a dick by saying this, that oh, he's doing this because, you know, he might be interested in doing something creatively, but it's also because, obviously, they paid him very well. He has been very upfront. I mean, in every interview, in every horror convention you go to where he speaks at, someone will ask him a question, like, why did you do that? And then he goes, because I wanted to, and they were going to pay me a lot of money. I mean, he's very upfront about loving money. So, you know, I don't think, I mean, and who wouldn't of us, you know, if we wrote a story in high school and someone said we want to make a movie of it and we want to pay you a lot of money to, you know, be a part of it, all of us would say yes. You know, so it's not a knock against him. You're just being a realist about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to crawl inside of his head and imagine what he's saying, what he's thinking when he says those things. I mean, obviously, if he says it, he means it. You know, you got to take that for what it is. But I also think, too, that the reality of the situation is, when, especially with The Thing, there's a lot of money that he knows that he felt he left, or I think he feels he left on the table because of the outcome of how they did at the box office. And now everybody wants to say how awesome The Thing was, but man, the reviews, you know, I get really bent out of shape over how harsh people are about reviews over movies that haven't come out yet, and how they kind of want to hammer stuff before they've seen it. And, you know, really, before the internet, I don't know that there was a whole lot else that was panned as heavily, especially being a good movie, as his version of The Thing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is my interpretation of John Carpenter, but I feel like that's almost like a souring point for him, where he was kind of plugging along, and then he real quickly turned into a, you know, and I don't blame him. I mean, the Thing, I know I'm more biased because I do love John Carpenter, but it's really his masterpiece. As much as I love Halloween and it's my favorite of his movies, but you got to understand too, that's also tied to a childhood memory of mine. Whereas The Thing I saw at a much older age, and I appreciated it for how good it was. But you know, Halloween holds that top spot because it rang my chimes at just the right time. But you know, if I made The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, if that was my name above the title, and that's what happened to it, you know, I don't know that I wouldn't be the exact same way. You know, this didn't make the money when it was out, nor did a lot of my other stuff. Bring me the paychecks. I'll take them now.
Yeah. Well, and what's funny is, you know, Carpenter thinks that The Thing is his best movie. But, you know, it was the one that was so viciously panned. And everybody wants to talk about Halloween, and that's not his favorite movie, and that's a movie he at this point doesn't want to talk about because he's talked about it for the past 30 plus years, and you know he doesn't. he doesn't, I don't think, put it on the same pedestal as everyone else. His favorite movie that he's done is The Thing. And even he has said, The Thing was the turning point in my career. If The Thing had been successful, movies like They Live and Prince of Darkness, Christine, those movies probably wouldn't have gotten made.
Right.
And those are the movies today that maybe not so much for Christine, but I mean, we've seen especially here lately, such a huge revival for like They Live and Prince of Darkness, and those were movies that I think they did okay in their time, but they very much went under the radar, and they were low budget films.
It actually wasn't until I think Memoirs of an Invisible Man where that was like the bottom of the barrel. And then he came out with In the Mouth of Madness, and then after that, while I've enjoyed his other movies, you can tell that he's been less enthusiastic about making each subsequent film after that. Whereupon where you get to The Ward, 10 years after even his Masters of Horror episodes, and you can't even believe, even if you like the movie, you can't even believe it's the same John Carpenter that made any of the classic films you like. It doesn't even seem like the same filmmaker.
Go ahead, sorry.
Somebody asked me about The Ward the other day. They were like, I think it was on Facebook. They were like, "Have you seen The Ward? And is it good?" And the answer is, yeah. I think it's good. I've seen it once. I have no desire to ever see it again. I think it's good. I think Carpenter makes it better than it probably should be, but it's not anything that's overwhelming or, it just kind of, I don't know. I mean, it's good. I think that's the best I can say about it, but it's...
And it's the one movie he's made in 40 years that is actually 185-1 instead of 235 scope. And right there, that's not a John Carpenter feeling film.
Right.
Even Deborah Hill would say, John Carpenter's name's got to be above the credits, and it's got to be in scope. And The Ward wasn't, and so you felt that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's funny because that's the feel of a Carpenter movie is what makes it a Carpenter movie, more so than anybody else I can really think of throughout my life of watching movies. I'm sure people could argue that there are, multiple other directors that put their kind of stamp on what they do, but I don't feel like any of them do it the same way. Carpenter's movies just they make such good sense to me because of how they make you feel. And interestingly enough, I've said this before, and I don't know if it ever makes sense when I say it, but I'm going to say it again. I feel like I like in Carpenter's movies like Assault on Precinct 13, Halloween, all the way through these movies until like he said, the point where they weren't terrible movies, they just didn't feel like Carpenter movies anymore. I liken it to like Mario Brothers. It's a great little video game. It's very simple in its presentation, but everything works perfectly. It feels right. It does what you want it to do. The weight of the character is just the way it should be. It's not overly heavy, but you don't feel like you can float into outer space when you jump in Mario either. I feel like Carpenter's movies are sort of the same way. Everything's grounded in something real, even if you don't know what the real is. There could be like a kind of an air of mystery over what's going on in the movie, and you still feel like it's grounded in something, and it always has the score that's going to keep you in it too, and then the nice wide shots that we were just talking about. I mean, it's a piece of artwork in every frame, kind of like an Argento type of thing, I don't know. It's hard to describe why you love it so much, because like I said, I only really have one personal I don't know, not empathetic, but I have one really personal tie to one of his movies, and that's Halloween. The rest of them, I love them because they stand on their own. It's not just because I was some kid in the theater watching this movie for the first time. I don't know. But that's just the way I feel about Carpenter in general, though. I just think it's a feel. It's a touch. And that's, I guess, what I'm hoping for moving forward with this new thing, even though we're talking executive producer and all of that stuff. I mean, the one thing, I don't know if you guys saw it, I'm sure you did, but the one quote, and I pulled it up here on a screen behind me, if it looks like I'm looking past everybody, but I like he's described Michael Myers not being a character, but more like a force of nature. But he says that again, but then he says he's like the wind, an evil wind. If you start straying away from that and you get into explaining, then you've lost.
Right.
So hopefully we can guide it back in that original direction.
But Carpenter himself over-explained it by making Jamie the sister.
But he reluctantly did that, though. Again.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying that he's not totally innocent here either. He's the one that gave us the whole mythos of it.
We're in dangerous territory, though, as far as I'm concerned, moving forward with this. I'm excited about it, and I think regardless if he does have any creative control over it at all, it will benefit from it. But will audiences that love the original and modern audiences together, will they be accepting of it? Because I can see Carpenter being a risk taker here and saying, okay, this is a Michael Myers story. But Carpenter's not afraid to take it places that maybe an audience isn't comfortable with. And, that's saying something considering the Rob Zombie ones, which I have grown to enjoy over time. I do actually enjoy those movies just fine, but you have to take them for what they are apart from what we've had. This case here, though, I hope that he's not backing himself into a lose-lose situation with he can make him back into that unstoppable, supernatural, part human force that he's saying here without over-explaining it. But how do you do that with, like you said, the parts to the story that he added in the sequels?
Well, here's
how do you start fresh?
Well, here's what I'm thinking. And of course, I'm speculating here. But the reason why I think Blumhouse never was touting his name, and I think Tiz, you even said this in your video, that his name is going to be bigger than any of the directors they end up getting for this project, no matter who it is. It's basically to do one thing, which is to basically bury the Rob Zombie films. They're going to make it, they're going to say John Carpenter is coming home, Michael Myers coming home, and if he is a force of nature, then one thing that I think would be cool is if they made this first film and it revolves around Michael Myers in whatever shape or form, no pun intended, I think if you can claim that he's a force of nature, then I think now is the time after this first initial film, Blumhouse, who is a risk taker at times, can move on from it and maybe actually start the Halloween anthology series Season of the Witch was supposed to kick off. Get everybody back on board with the Michael Myers train, and then we can move on. Because who says the force of nature has to be Michael Myers? It could be something else. It could be another force of, hopefully it's not like The Happening, but, just another force of something. And that could be a way, because today's audiences, the way they talk about Halloween 3, today's audiences are ready for a Halloween anthology series. And I think that's the way they could go and not, and keep John Carpenter involved without making it feel stale.
Do you think Malek Akkad will let that happen, considering what Mustafa said way back in the day, that he would never do that again? Michael will always be in Halloween.
I think, I don't, as much love as Halloween 3 has now, I think if they did that, the movie, that film today would get the backlash that Halloween 3 got back in 80, whatever. Because I think, Michael Myers is Halloween. When people see a Halloween movie, they want to see Michael Myers. Now, if they could, I would have loved to have seen, these three companies come together with John Carpenter to do something totally different, to do that yearly anthology series, to not even call it Halloween. That announcement would have got me excited. But I guess, let me say this to everybody who's watching at home. Join in the conversation with us by tweeting at me, at Pizzell, there it is on the screen, or leave questions, comments in the comment section of the video, and we'll get around to answering those and discussing those shortly. And some people on Facebook have left questions and stuff as well.
And I was just going to add real quick. Remember, who was it? It was Jamie Lee Curtis, Kevin Williamson, Miramax. They all wanted John Carpenter to direct H2O, and he turned them down. I know some people don't like H2O. I actually really like that movie. I think that actually should have been the end of the Halloween series rather than Resurrection. But John Carpenter does, if you have the original Dimension Films DVD release, John Carpenter is on a featurette, and he speaks so proudly of H2O, talking about how they actually, went forward with the themes that he thought up with a six-pack of beer in terms of the sister angle and made it coherent. And he was he was just giving that film tremendous praises, which is something I've never really seen unless it's like a Sergio Leone film or something. I don't really see John Carpenter going out of his way to talk highly about another film, especially one that I know that if you get the Divimax Anchor Bay, this is actually a commentary. They have a commentary in here that the Criterion Laserdisc had as well, and he says at the very end of that movie, at the commentary, that there's been 6 sequels to my film Halloween, and it's very sad. Like he's very just upset that they even like went further than Halloween 2 or continue the Michael Myers story. So for him to jump back on board, I agree. Like you said, I think there's a paycheck, but he hasn't done anything since the Ward, and he was very happy doing nothing for 10 years until he did the Ward. So for him to come back, while I think it is a paycheck, I think there has to be something there, even if it is just music, because he's quite happy just doing nothing.
Well, let's play some. Let's speculate a little bit here.
Right.
Maybe it was the paycheck, but maybe it was the opportunity to put the series to bed. Maybe they've pitched this to him and to his involvement as like, hey man, you were here for the beginning, you created this. Let's all end it together with you on board, you guiding us creatively. Let's end it. Let's put it to bed. And hey, there's going to be a sweet paycheck in there for you too. There was a comment on my video, and I don't recall who left it, but it was a great comment. And he said, how they should do this movie is not a sequel, not a remake, not a prequel, just a Halloween movie that had all the basic standard, simple, effective, suspenseful kind of elements of the original one. New characters, new everything, and just have Michael Myers, doing what he does, and just keep it simple and focus on the things that worked in the first movie. Not try to expand it or extend it or try to, tie anything together. Just straight, simple, suspenseful horror, very much like the original Halloween. And I thought that was a fantastic idea. And I certainly hope what concerns me really is how seriously they're going to take this movie and how seriously John Carpenter will take his role as producer. And we're going to see how serious they're taking it very soon when the writer is announced, when the director is announced.
Yeah.
And before then, it's all just up in the air because, if they hire the guy who wrote one of the paranormal possession movies, they're probably not taking it very seriously. If they're hiring some dude who, directed a Miley Cyrus music video, they're probably not taking it very seriously. They're banking the movie on the name Halloween and the name John Carpenter, and that's it.
If they come out and they say in a press release that John Carpenter and Nick Castle are writing this movie together, I will literally piss my pants.
Oh. Wouldn't that be amazing? Oh my gosh. There's a lot of angles though. I mean, do you think that they're going to just ditch their? I mean,
no,
here's the thing.
I don't think they're going to put it to bed. They're getting it. They're just Blumhouse loves to sequelize.
But I think, and this has been done before, and but I think you kind of have to work. We could go into this for hours too, and I don't want to, trust me. But I think outside of the female cast and all of that crap, I think the complete ignorance that these people have of pretending like the original Ghostbusters didn't happen is what's really making fans mad about that movie more than anything else. You're ignoring it and you're saying it doesn't exist, and then you're going to have the cast parade back on as cameos, not as their characters, and blah, blah, blah. And that really frustrates people because Ghostbusters does hold, and even though it's not marketed to the same old nerds like me, it still hurts. It's like it's a slap in the face. How can they not especially with Carpenter's name being attached to it, include Carpenter's original story somewhere in the building of this. So the only thing you can do is springboard from the end of 2 again. And I thought last night, now this may not work, but in my head I'm thinking maybe it's a possibility where Michael kills Laurie, okay? So maybe the burns don't affect him because he is just this force of nature. They don't explain it. He just gets up and walks away. Burnt, charred, nasty, whatever. Finds Laurie, kills her, returns to Haddonfield the next Halloween, and just does it again to somebody else. Now you've reestablished the fact that he is just a force of evil, and the fact that Laurie's a sister didn't mean a hill of beans to him. He's back to his home turf to kill some more people, and we don't know why. You can end that kind of in a Carpenter way, but will they springboard off of Halloween 2 again? You know? I don't know if they go that route.
What if they X-Men Days of Future Past this and just spring off of 1 and just ignore 2 on?
And that's a good possibility.
Yeah, that was a possibility that was brought up in the comment section of the video that I did, where, well, what if they just exclude everything beyond Halloween 1? Like, this new Halloween film picks up, you know, Michael falls off the balcony and he gets up and walks away. And I thought, you know, I'm someone who even if it's a bad movie, I kind of hate that they pretend that, you know, when in these series they pretend like individual installments don't exist. You know what I mean? That just makes me feel icky, because it kind of makes me want to say, well, okay, well, if that movie didn't exist, I want my money back. If you're trying to tell me that movie doesn't exist now, give my money back, you know, or you can't tell me that movie didn't exist. So, and I do like Halloween 2 as a movie. It complicated things that down the road kind of the series kind of went into the ground because of the things they established in Halloween 2. But I really like Halloween 2 as a movie. So I said, you know, I don't want them to totally negate Halloween 2, but I think it should pick up there. You know, and again, I don't know. I mean, we're playing with, you know, the sister angle, but see, here's an interesting thing too. Justin Beam, who is kind of is a Halloween insider. He was working on the Halloween book very much. It was going to be for Halloween what Peter Brackey's book was for Friday the 13th, but it's never quite happened because of copyright issues and et cetera, et cetera. He said that he was cryptic on Facebook when it was announced that John Carpenter was returning. He said that another very familiar face would also possibly be returning for this film too. Now, what other very familiar face in this series is there?
Jamie Lee Curtis.
I interpreted that though as he said, "Stay tuned to Halloween movies" on Facebook, and I got the feeling that meant that Justin himself was going to be returning to work in some capacity for HalloweenMovies.com. That's the way I took that. Maybe I'm wrong though, but I took that to be. I would have to look back at the post again, but I took that as they were kind of dropping their angle on the same news, which is great. I love Justin. Justin's a great guy. But I interpreted that as, you know, stay tuned to Halloween movies, and who knows, you may see a familiar face back there too. That's the way I took that. Maybe I read it incorrectly though.
And I agree with you. I agree with you, Piz, because like for instance, in H2O, a movie I said earlier that I enjoyed, I wish that there had been one extra line in that movie where when she's talking to her son, if she had admitted to him, you know, I want you to know that you do have a half sister. You know, I gave her up to adoption years ago, but, you know, you do have a sibling out there. Because then it would be playing off the sibling angle, and it would not negate 4 through 6.
Yes. Yeah, that's so simple, but you're right.
Here's the Justin Beam post, verbatim. Carpenter returns to Halloween as producer. Stay tuned to Halloween movies. You may soon be seeing another familiar face there, too. So, I guess you could interpret that a couple of different ways, really. I mean, either a familiar face is returning to HalloweenMovies.com, which, I mean, that could be like him or Anthony Massey, who used to run HalloweenMovies.com, or, I mean, maybe he's talking about to the movie. I mean, I don't know. I guess you can interpret that either way.
If they springboarded off part 2, I guess you wouldn't have to, but because one of the big holes in this going forward in any way, shape, or form, if you're going off the original timeline, is the Loomis character. Obviously, if you go off number 2, you could say Loomis died from that explosion. I mean, he did light the match, but I mean, that's just, I mean, Donald Pleasance not being in these Halloween movies, obviously he died, but that is a huge hole, because for years he was the Halloween franchise. Even when John Carpenter and Jamie Lee Curtis turned their backs on it, he was the one that was spearheading, 4 through 6. So I'm curious to know, like, how do you do Michael Myers without a Laurie Strode or a Sam Loomis? That's kind of difficult to do. You need that Captain Ahab character, or the victim that we empathize with. So
if you do springboard off of 1, though, and he gets up and walks away, you still have to assume Laurie's going to the hospital, and you still have to assume Loomis is going to be protecting her in some way. And maybe he continues his massacre somewhere else in town because he doesn't have a sister anymore, and he doesn't give a rat's tail where she went. She was just the meat for the night. He's going to go find some more.
Here's a crazy idea. Let's springboard off of part 1. It's an Evil Dead 2 style Evil Dead remake.
Ooh.
where Laurie is not his sister. They remove that whole thing from it entirely. And it's like I said, an Evil Dead 2 type Evil Dead remake, but with some things changed, and that way they could certainly move forward with a whole slew of other not remakes, but a whole slew of other Halloween films, I think, and leave behind that entanglement of Michael Myers has family issues, that really took him out of being this, phenomenon, this force of nature, to just being like, hey,
a kid with baggage.
Well,
exactly.
If the Rob Zombie movies did anything decent, I think there are some pluses to those movies, though. I personally found it fascinating as a Halloween fan, even though it's not the John Carpenter timeline. I love that scene in the television version where we got the scene of Loomis talking to the 2 doctors, the admin, and then going to Michael's room and saying, you fooled them, haven't you, Michael, but not me. In fact, that's the version I grew up watching, the TV version. So when I saw the VHS version, I was like, where is that scene?
Me too.
But that was one thing I liked about the Rob Zombie movies was, especially the first one, it had a whole section of Michael in the hospital as a kid. And while that may over-explain things, to me, I always felt that was kind of a hole that I wanted to know more about, because when Loomis says, I spent, 7 years trying to reach him, another 8 trying to lock him up, or maybe I have it reversed, I want to know, what was Loomis like with Michael Myers as a kid growing up and not wanting to kill him? I always wanted to see that dynamic. Obviously, Carpenter will never go that route because I will over-explain it, but I'm trying to figure out, and this is the thing about Halloween, it's so kind of movie perfection that there's not a lot of holes that you can explore. So if they do reboot it, I don't think many people will be too upset, because most people didn't like the Rob Zombie movies. But I don't think Carpenter really wants to come back and just do the same thing again. That's what he hates about the sequels. So if he does take it a new area, okay, great, but he's not going to make it aliens and stuff like that, because that obviously will over-explain something. So how do you get back to just, a sleepy small town, nobody is aware of this freight train heading towards them?
Yeah.
They've lifted the veil. The veil is lifted, and you can't put it back on. That's what's so confusing about Halloween compared to a franchise like Friday the 13th. Honestly, people can complain all they want to, but it really doesn't matter as long as there's a hockey mask killer and a bunch of kids to kill. You can really go any direction you want to go. You can go any place you want to go. With Halloween, the tone has always been set in a more heavy manner. There's more gravity to what's going on around these folks, especially in the first film and to a degree the second film, and it's, where do you fit into this puzzle? It's hard because you do have the Halloween 4, 5, 6 problem, and let's be honest, I think the majority of folks are going to say 1, 2, and 4 are favorite movies in the franchise, and to a degree, it's weird. Like, I watch 2 the most. I think 1's the best. Part 4 has some of my favorite characters in all of the series in it, you know. But these things are all just they're all over the place, and I don't know. Can you put that veil back on that baby and pretend like you haven't kissed her yet? You know, I mean, that's the.
Well, what if they flip it?
Crowd.
I mean, what if they flip it? What if they took it out of the sleepy small town and, you know, put it in, you know, Pittsburgh, you know, or put it in a, you know, a predominantly African American community? I mean, they could almost retell the story in a different neighborhood, would change the tone.
Michael Myers would not last 5 minutes in the ghetto.
Probably not. I'm just throwing it out there.
Brought a knife to a gunfight.
Exactly. There you go.
I mean, what if they took Mike? I mean, this is obviously they're not going to do this, but I mean, what if you took out The Thing and put in Michael Myers, and it was those 6 guys in Antarctica, and Michael Myers was after him? Yes, it would be the Howard Hawks version of The Thing, but still, I mean, just by putting, you know, it's like what the screenwriter Todd Farmer always says about Jason 10, right? Well, if we had just done Jason in the Snow, or if we did something like that, just changing one little thing can change tone.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But the other piece too is people complained about the new Star Wars being too much of a play on you know, nostalgia, and I can understand the complaint there to a degree. Although I think it really worked for Star Wars. You know, I think tickling that nostalgia bone for some people, and then adding enough new to progress a story in a certain direction you want it to go. I honestly, in a lot of ways, feel like Halloween is ripe for just a complete nostalgia fest. I don't think Carpenter would want that.
Right.
But I feel like audiences out there, though, you know, to me, I think in my head, what if Carpenter did direct this movie? You put him back in South Pasadena with all of his equipment, and you tell him to make a movie set in the late 1970s. I would love to see what he does with that, you know? But I don't think he would be down to do that. So it's hard to tell. I mean, I think we all have a perception of what Carpenter's like and who he is, and we may be way off on that, but maybe we're not. I mean, he seems like he's got his mind set on what he likes, what he doesn't like, where he wants to go and where he doesn't want to go. And I think that's the reason why this is such a confusing situation for him to be back involved again.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't do anything he doesn't want to do. He's always done his own thing. Now, and like we said in the beginning, I'm sure money is a huge motivator to get him back involved in this movie. But I'm thinking there had to be maybe some other pull. Again, like the, hey man, you know, let's end it. We want you here. You started it. You end it. You know, there had to be some other.
I'll tell you what it is, Piz. I'll tell you what it is. Full creative control. Because Blumhouse works on such a low budget that it's not even a risk for them. I mean, they was it you that said they distribute so many films that they just dump them to video and DVD and stuff like that. But I'll tell you one thing: if Carpenter gets Kurt Russell to show up as Sam Loomis, now we're talking.
Yeah, now we're talking. Now we're talking. Yeah. Well, and somebody, the rumor right now is that Mike Flanagan, who directed Hush, Oculus, and Absentia, is going to direct. And if I'm hoping above all hope that that's true, because he's directed. I've not seen Hush. I hear really good things, but Absentia and Oculus were great, I thought, and I think the perfect kind of especially Absentia, that tone was perfect, I think, to come over to a Halloween film.
I'll tell you who needs to do it is Del Toro, because that man needs a hit, all right? Pacific Rim didn't do well, Crimson Tide didn't do well, and he just went on Twitter and, you know, kissed John Carpenter's butt for 20 tweets in a row. He needs a low-budget hit, you know? Yeah. I would love to see what Del Toro would do with Halloween.
I almost think Del Toro would be kind of handcuffed, because Del Toro's super visual and, you know, special effects and stuff, and this would be, you know, just not
pared way back.
Just not his cup of tea, I don't think.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, Del Toro would be. I mean, I'm sure that would definitely get a lot of people hyped. But I don't know. But for me, I mean, Flanagan, I think
we would get dream sequences like in this movie if we had tutorial probably. But you know,
what about if they were able to resurrect Dean Cundy, even if Carpenter didn't direct?
Mm-hmm.
You know, set those shots up, that perfect blue lighting. You know, the perfect wide shots where you're looking in every frame for that white mask. I mean, that's how, as a kid, I spent my time watching that movie. Was I'm scouring the screen, and no subsequent, you know, Halloween film past that made me feel like I needed to do that as much. I mean, I know they tried to pull a little, oh, there he stands, oh, now he's gone, and a couple of them were effective. I mean, like the one in the Halloween 4 where you see him down the corridor and with the cop in the rocking chair, you know, with the gun, and then the light goes away and he's gone. You know, that was cool, but there was no movie like the first Halloween where I was really searching every piece of the screen looking for. It was always irrational sometimes too. Why would he be hanging out by the hardware store after he just robbed the hardware store? But I was still looking because the movie had taught me to that point he's somewhere, you know.
Well, do you remember Halloween 5 always cracks me up because of this. Michael Myers is everywhere in Halloween 5, and in the middle of the day, and he's hiding behind a shrub like this in the middle of the day, and nobody sees him. He's like 7 feet tall. He's got a big white mask on. He's the town's most notorious serial killer mass murderer, and he's just hanging out, just hovering in broad daylight, hanging out, hiding behind a bush the size of this pin. Nobody can see him. Nobody sees him.
Hey, at Halloween 1, Jamie Lee Curtis looking out her window. She sees Michael Myers standing there. She doesn't even look away. She just continues to look out that window, and then he's gone. So
exactly.
But what worries me the most is if this Halloween movie is being made, and who knows, maybe Carpenter is planning to come on full board, and something happens in the dealings of it, and he, you know, cuts way back too. I mean, we don't know what it may evolve and change. But what makes me worry is that if a movie like this is being made, this almost predicts that Donald Trump could be president, because whenever there's a Republican president, we always have the greatest horror movies ever made. And whenever we have a Democrat president, we have terrible horror films that get made. Go back and look through history. It's true.
Oh, man. I don't like that stat, but I like good horror movies.
Yeah, no, we're torn. We're torn now, yeah.
Man.
Well, let's see. We had some people ask questions on my Facebook page. And again, if you guys out there watching have any questions or comments for us, leave them in the comment section of the video. Tweet them at me at Pizzal, and let us know what you think of of Halloween 2017 with John Carpenter on board. Will Barber via Facebook asks, how do you think John Carpenter coming back into the franchise will affect the Halloween storyline? I think we talked about that a little bit. And honestly, I think if he is there and he has at least some creative control, he's going to say, keep it simple. Simple, simple, simple. And I hope that's the route they go.
Do you think they'll try and incorporate, you know, you're talking about a nostalgia fest. Do you think they'll try and incorporate this as a kind of a film that in some ways brings together other Carpenter films, like on the radio? Do you think we'll hear like Adrienne Barbeau on the radio?
Oh, wouldn't that be awesome? Stevie Wayne on the radio?
That'd be nice.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Well, I mean, you mentioned it. We were talking, Andrew, you were talking about The Force Awakens not long ago and the nostalgia trip of that. I mean, that certainly did not go unseen by producers in Hollywood. You know what I mean? And, you know, clearly, you know, and Jason Blum is a smart guy, and he's a good businessman. He produces way too many movies in a short period of time, but I think he knows what he's doing, and I think it's nostalgia. I think it's name recognition.
And that's the thing, name recognition. Though you're talking about a horror crowd, which is a much on a large scale is a small portion of. You're dealing with not only a horror crowd, but a section of the horror crowd. You know, the horror crowd from a massive standpoint is now your Paranormal Activity crowd. So
right.
One thing that I noticed was a big mistake, and we talked about on our podcast, was we talked about video games made into movies, and the biggest miss with the Ratchet and Clank movie was Ratchet and Clank was a popular video game in 2002, and its sequels in the video game world subsequently were popular up until about 2005 or 6. Now you're going to pump out a new game and a movie, and not a damn person in the world knows who Ratchet and Clank are anymore, so it bombs horrifically. Nobody, because the movie references the game references the movie, and nobody gives a shit about either. And that's now we have this problem, though, I feel, with Halloween, and I think there's a fix for it. I do, and I think you can get people back into these old franchises because they ring a bell with enough people to get enough buzz out there. But do you remember the guy who they got on H2O to do the Dead Ringer voiceover for Dr. Loomis?
Right.
At the very beginning.
Yeah, I don't remember his name, but I know what you're talking about.
I don't know who that guy is. I don't know if he's even still alive, but the dude was amazing. If you did something after the first movie or the second movie, if that's the route that they want to go, I would, let's just say even after the first movie, forget the Laurie sister, the whole thing. You could probably tie all of that up and reestablish the fact that he spent 15 years trying to figure this kid out until he finally realized this guy is the embodiment of evil. You know, Carpenter may just have him do that little bit of writing. Do one more nice Loomis speech at the beginning that said basically on this night was the culmination of everything that I knew was going to come to fruition, and it did. And he's still out there.
Do you know who they could bring back? You know who they could bring back, though? Because he hasn't been back since Part 2, and he just subsequently just disappears in the middle of Part 2.
Oh, Lance Guest.
We get Charles Cyphers back.
Oh, Charles Cyphers. Oh, no, good point. Dude, that guy would be amazing.
Because he
does just disappear.
He just disappears, and that blonde sheriff dude takes over in the halfway through Part 2. And I keep wondering, I remember talking to Charles, what happened? He goes, I don't know. John just wrote me out of the movie. Time to bring him back.
Man, Sheriff Brackett back, because he just goes basically to grieve losing his daughter, and you don't hear from him again.
No.
Yeah. Oh man, that would be real. That's a really good point, because you could go a lot of directions with that. He has enough experience with,
and
Loomis
he wants to.
Too.
He would do it. He would do it. I mean, he's semi-retired now, but. Come on, he would come out of retirement for John Carpenter.
And in all honesty, he has enough experience with him as a character. You know, Sheriff Brackett has enough experience with Michael Myers as a character with just that one night to essentially take the mantle as the new Loomis.
He could.
He may not be a doctor, but he has a reason to care about the fact that he would still be at large in some fashion.
What if they do the continuation of Part 2? And it's in the early 80s, and we just assume, and we have the young Sheriff Brackett. We have a young actor take over for Sheriff Brackett. We just say Dr. Loomis died in the fire. He blew up. He died. But they only found one body in the fire, and it was Dr. Loomis. So he takes over as, the Ishmael after Michael Myers. I mean that's and that could remove Laurie from the equation too.
And you're not explaining Michael, you're explaining Sheriff Brackett.
And I think one of the things we love about the Halloween series as compared to Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th is that pursued angle. We really like the idea of someone's pursuing Michael while he's pursuing others. It was just like this. It was sort of like this Moby Dick type of thing. And I think that what made it, kind of a horror soap opera that we all got behind. The other thing I was going to point out is we all love Halloween 1. There's a lot of horror fans obviously love Halloween 1, but regular horror fans today, they think Halloween 1 is slow and boring. And the idea of taking it back to those roots sounds great to us, but I don't know about the new crowd. I don't know about that. In the Blumhouse, if you look at their stuff, they get a lot of flack because a lot of their movies end the same way with these jump scares. Yeah. And, I don't think John Carpenter will be wanting to do things in the Blumhouse mold. And I hopefully, with him being now affiliated with them, they let him do what he would want to do as opposed to trying to make John Carpenter into their box of goodies that they, release to everybody all the time. So.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I mean, I think it really depends on who they hire to really direct the movie. You know, if it's a Mike Flanagan, I can see it being very much a slower, more suspenseful kind of burn. You know, or if they hire the guy who directed The Forest, you know, then we're gonna get, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're gonna get that kind of movie. You know.
Did you see the Brad Fuller interview that I think he did on? It was This Is Infamous, a YouTube channel. Brad Fuller, of course, is part of the Michael Bay Platinum Dunes thing, and they were asking him about the new Friday the 13th, which of course has been forever in development, and they go, "Yeah, we just got a script from the writer of Prisoners."
Yeah.
And he says, and I'm quoting kind of, he's a better writer than this franchise deserves. Mm-hmm. Now, I understand what he means, but to Friday the 13th fans, that's like a giant middle finger to them. Like, what? You're going to get this great writer and tell us that he's slumming it? So,
well, and then they followed that up with, here's this awesome writer who's so much better than the series. He turned in his first draft. They sent it back to him with notes. It wasn't good enough. They sent it back to him with notes. So not only is this writer, now they're saying we're smarter than the writer. The writer is better than the series, and we're better. We know more than the writer. And you're sending this guy notes.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And that's what I'm getting at, is if you have somebody who wrote Prisoners right Friday the 13th, who are they going to get to write Halloween? Like I said, now if they got someone like John Carpenter and Nick Castle to do it, or even somebody in John Carpenter's stable to do it, obviously Deborah Hill's no longer around, but I think, okay, they have John Carpenter on board. That's great. We need other things on board for us horror fans to really get behind this. So hopefully they can do it. I mean, you know, the Rob Zombie films, you know, I think after Devil's Rejects, people were kind of excited about his first film, and then when we saw it, we were like, oh, that? Okay. So.
Yeah. Oh, I was super stoked to see Rob Zombie's Halloween, because I thought, well, hey, you know, they're remaking everything. At least they're giving the reins to this remake to a horror fan. And then, of course, I sat and watched it and was suicidal afterwards. But anyway, let's see. Tim writes to us on Facebook. He says, thanks for reminding me that Carpenter was the executive producer on the Fog remake. That worries me now about the new Halloween movie. He promises that it will be the scariest of the sequels. We can only hope. You need to check out Hush on Netflix. Definitely worth seeing.
So Carpenter said that it'll be the scariest of the sequels?
He said it will be the. I think he said something to the effect of it will be the scariest Halloween film of something.
Okay, because if he said that, then it is a sequel. You know.
Yeah, I'm trying to. It was something along those lines. I don't know if he mentioned sequel, but I know he said he wants this one to be the scariest something Halloween film of the past 20 years, or I don't know, who knows. But he wants it to be, you know, the scariest Halloween film that we've had in a very long time.
Announce Rob Zombie's making it, and it will be to the fans. That'll be scary.
That'll scare them. I mean, yeah, like I said, that grew on me. Yeah, they grew on me, but you got to take them completely off the beaten path. They got to be off the beaten path completely. Not, you know, the comparison kills that. See it with a fresh set of eyes. See the character for what it is, and understand that it's not what you grew up with. But you know, when you first go see it, though, that's not the expectation you go into it with. And I think that's a lot of the major initial backlash, and then, you know, even though the Halloween 2 that he made was initially not something I enjoyed at all, I do have aspects of that movie, and as a whole, it's something I can, you know, palate a little bit better now than I could then. I don't know, but
I just have a problem because he second-guessed himself, because his work print leaked before the theatrical cut of the first one came out, and there are scenes in the work print that are better than the theatrical or his director's cut.
Well, I think that was studio interference too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it could have been. I think there was the potential for something there. I think that he just overthinks things and decides to give major scenes and backstory to every single character in his films.
He's the George Lucas of the titty bar, is the way it really comes out to. Because, like, you know, you're establishing that Michael's mom is a stripper. We don't need... Now, granted, I'm a fella, and I'm down with all of this stuff. We don't need to go on a detour through the strip club to understand that, though. You just wasted how much of your movie being Rob Zombie and showing all of the inner workings of the booby bar, and we don't need that. You know, like, this is not telling your story any better. We don't need in your director's cut a whole cutaway of some prison guard raping an inmate. That's you're taking us away from where the story is supposed to go, and then eventually you don't know who to connect with, who not to connect with. His wife is a terrible performer. You know you can't connect with her. You know, so you're
everybody is an asshole in that series. Everybody.
Yeah.
So there's nobody to root for. You just kind of sit back and let the carnage just happen.
Right.
That was an amazing quote, Andrew. The George Lucas of the titty bar.
Well, think about
that
it.
Was brilliant.
George Lucas is the master of thinking of unnecessary scenes just to show off what he's interested in my opinion. You know? Like, oh, well, we can generate these animals in the background and the foreground, so let's do it, right?
Ooh.
Rob Zombie sits back and thinks, oh, I could show like 16 boobs in this one scene before I get to the dialogue. Let's do that.
Well, maybe we can get a Halloween prequel that focuses on taxation.
There we go.
Thank you. I used to think Jim Wynorski was the George Lucas of the titty bar, but he has been unseated by Rob Zombie. He has been unseated by
the George Lucas of the titty bar. Yeah, but I'm telling you, I think he and George Lucas have a lot of similarities. I think they are great visual storytellers. They can't write to save themselves, and they cannot make a cohesive story make sense. Neither one of them can.
If somebody had written a script for Halloween and Rob Zombie just directed it, I think it could have been great.
It would have been much improved, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that, like I said, just changing something about Michael, like where he attacks, changes the tone. Well, I mean, I think Rob Zombie made that point too, where he said, I got, John Carpenter had Dean Cundey, and I got the cinematographer who did a Morris Peros. And right there, that would change the tone of Halloween. If John Carpenter shot Halloween all handheld, like Wolf Creek or something like that, it would have changed the movie entirely. Same story, same actors, everything. So, hopefully they don't go handheld, with
That's
the
another thing too.
Movie.
Yeah. Jason Neal messages on Facebook. He says, in my opinion, the coolest idea for a new Halloween would be to just have it be a movie about Michael Myers that has no real relation to the old series or the zombie flicks. Just have these elements: October, Halloween holiday atmosphere, likable teen characters, and Michael Myers is the boogeyman after them. No origin, no references to Laurie Strode, no Dr. Loomis. Just introduce some kids and have Myers stalk them. Simplicity.
See, I like that. However, when I hear that, let me just flip over and be kind of a little negative on that. I think of the New Line Jason movies, the Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, where basically you got sequel after sequel that had no relation to each other. And so it was just kind of like, what? Okay, I thought he was here. Okay, now we're in space. Now we're this. Now we're here. It just, at least the Paramount films, the Friday had some sort of continuity, even if it was kind of mixed bag at times. So yeah, if they just came out and just said Michael Myers is back, he's in Haddonfield and this and that, that's great as a standalone. But the fans in us will want to figure out where does this go in continuity, and that's going to drive us fucking nuts.
And the reason why we did that in the first film was because you knew that he was an escaped mental patient. So all you did watching the movie was wonder, what is he capable of? I know that he killed his sister. And so you did have enough backstory, even though you don't have any explanation. Don't need the explanation. I agree with Carpenter's thoughts on that, even though he did break his own rules. But you knew where he came from. You knew enough of his past to understand how dangerous he truly could be to these kids. And I don't know how you could every time you put Spider-Man in another movie, you have to introduce him in some way, even though we've all seen Spider-Man introduced in 16 different ways on film. You can't just introduce Michael Myers into another movie here without having any explanation of where he's come from. He can't just show up on the scene like James Bond, and you expect old audience, new audience, and everybody to work on as a team and understand that here's the horror James Bond showing up to do what he does.
And now John Carpenter, we're kind of teasing him a little bit by saying he broke his own rules by explaining Laurie's a sister, but I say that in jest because when I was a kid and I saw Halloween 2, I remember when it was Laurie Strode's the sister, and then Pleasance is doing his whole Sam Hain speech. I'm perking up as a kid because now Halloween has become not just a small town scary story. It's almost like John Carpenter saying this is now mythic, and I remember just getting really excited about that. So I didn't feel like that over-explained anything really. I think the sequel's kind of, by the time we got into the Thorn cult, that's really over-explaining.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully, maybe they'll do a direct sequel to Part 6 and further explore the Thorn cult. That would be interesting.
And bring Paul Rudd back. Why not?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Bring back the Rudd.
Ant-Man can be in the next Halloween movie, as Ant-Man.
Do you think they'd focus on the Doyle kids, the Lindsay and obviously I know they're neighbors and stuff, but obviously they did in Halloween 6, or Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. They got rid of the 6 in the title for whatever reason. But yeah, I think that would be kind of interesting, just to kind of, because you want to. I think they want to tie it into the original series somewhat, Maybe.
They can't not in some way. You're likening it back to the Ghostbusters thing again. We haven't seen that movie yet, but the way that it sounds is they're going to call themselves that and not be referential to the original. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe they're just holding that back and it'll be some pleasant surprise. But I don't think in a movie like Halloween you can go just one off and not have any reference if you don't have it set in Haddonfield, if you don't have it set on the night of Halloween, if you don't have Michael Myers in his mask and that he's escaped from the loony bin. That's what's, and the only thing that the whole Jamie Lee Curtis being the sister thing, the Laurie Strode sister story is, it wasn't that it was bad, it was that it painted you into a corner. Because now Michael has one goal, and that's to kill his family. And how many people does that really lead you? Well, now you have to figure out his niece is next, and then you have to figure, oh no, she went to California, changed her name, and he figured it out. Now he's going to go find her, as opposed to where we could go with this whole new Carpenter thing, hopefully, is he doesn't really have any ties to anything. He is just, we'll call it randomly. He's all the way evil, but he exercises it randomly. That's only, I don't know.
Thank God. Thank God Halloween Resurrection has already been made, because that will keep Blumhouse away from the the camcorder horror stuff. So
this is true.
Well, and one of the things that was really interesting, I thought, about Halloween too, about Halloween, just the original Halloween, was he was just a man, essentially just a man, who had these, he was essentially just a man, a very sick, disturbed man who saw a girl, got fascinated by her, and stalked her on Halloween and killed her friends and tried to kill her. That's pretty simple. You know what I mean? And again, he was just a man. Now he was sort of portrayed as this force, but he was essentially just a guy who saw a girl, got infatuated, and followed her, stalked her.
Right. And he had limitations, but you didn't know why. Why did he have limitations?
Yeah. And personally, I love John Carpenter. I love his work. I don't know. I've never bought into this Michael as the Shape. Primarily because he's not portrayed as a force in the first film, because he walks from room to room. It's not like he just appears in rooms like Jason does in sequels, He has to make that long trek across the street to get to Laurie. A force of nature would just be able to just appear and then take her out. Maybe, but I do like the fact that when he got shot and disappeared, that you hear his breathing in all the rooms.
Yeah.
That to me is like where he becomes almost the Shape, where he could be anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah.
But through the whole movie, this is a guy that still gets into a car and drives and, kind of creeps up on Tommy and stuff like that. That's not really a force like the wind. you know. So
Right. Well, and my buddy Click the Cosigner, he posted the quote from John Carpenter in the comment section of the video. He says Carpenter wrote, "This will be the scariest and most horrifying film of all time, and that's a promise." He did not say a Halloween film, just the scariest and most horrifying film of all time, period. So
well, that's a poster quote.
That's a bold statement. That's a bold statement. Let's see what else is going on in the comment section of the video. DJ Donnelly's watching. How you doing, DJ? UNC 187 says Carpenter's involvement is a step in the right direction. It doesn't mean the new movie will be great, but at least it is being treated with respect.
I agree.
Carpenter's not afraid to make people mad either, though. I don't feel. I mean, what's stopping him from not wearing the mask anymore? What's stopping him from even having to, if he is this force being in the body of Michael Myers anymore? What's stopping him from not stalking in Haddonfield anymore? If he really has no rhyme or reason or any particular draw to one thing or the other because he's just this force of evil and you don't need to really know why, and that he could really just be anywhere. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. And while I personally don't have a huge problem with that, if he wants to make the scariest movie of all time, he probably shouldn't make a Halloween sequel. He probably should get his resources together and make another terrifying movie, because there's too many rules in this series now. There's too many expectations, and he's got to make his movie here. But if I was just going to make my movie, I don't want to make a Halloween movie because there's just too many established standards here that are not going to be easy to break without getting your boo birds out. It could be the most scary movie you've ever seen, but if they break enough of the Halloween standard rules here that have been set since the original, people are going to call it the crappiest thing they've ever laid their eyes on.
And he's not just competing against one film, he's competing against that entire Scream Factory box set, that 10-disc box set.
Yeah.
That's a lot of material that you have to best. And in fact, if you look at Halloween and maybe The Fog as well, I would argue that John Carpenter has never really, even though he has done obviously a lot of horror films stuff, I don't think he's ever tried to scare us as much as Halloween or The Fog in terms of mood. I think the other films are horror in nature, but they're not going for visceral scares, So I'm curious to see, okay, if he's like, okay, I'm going to put on my horror hat and say, I'm now doing this, like he said with Deborah Hill, which was he kind of did what who's the writer of Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal, I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Thomas Harris.
Thomas Harris. They made a list of scares, and then created the story around the scares. So if he's going to do that, then that might get him back on track in terms of because he's never really made. I mean, look at as much as we like Prince of Darkness and any of his other films, they're not going out to just terrify the living fuck out of us like Halloween and The Fog tried to do. So I'm curious to see if he's saying quotes like that. I'm curious. I'm kind of scared as to what he may be thinking of doing with this film.
Mm-hmm.
Why has he never approached a Western? I mean, the way that Assault on Precinct 13...
Well, vampires, yeah. I mean, I think that's about as close as he's done.
Does he have to be the horror master anymore, though? I mean, can't he go down the road of like a...
I think he's in the same boat as like Romero or Tobe Hooper or some of these other guys. They're so identified with horror that their name can help get a horror movie made, but their name could. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure George. It's a blessing and a curse. I'm sure George Romero would have liked to have done more over the course of the past 20 years than, straight-to-video zombie movies. But that's probably all he's been able to do or to get off the ground. And I think with Carpenter, Carpenter Carpenter did, he did Starman, which was definitely not horror. Big Trouble in Little China was not horror, but nobody watched those movies. Those movies didn't do well.
John Carpenter made Elvis, a 3-hour epic with Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still think Assault on Precinct 13 is just a brilliantly shot movie too. I mean, that's just a great movie from start to finish. I would love to see him do other stuff.
And then he remade it himself as Ghost of Mars.
That's true. Lucky Grub messages us on Facebook with an interesting story idea. He proposes, what if the new Halloween picks up after H2O, and it's Laurie hunting Michael?
But she chopped his head off.
Well, she chopped off the cop's head. She finds that, she realizes it's.
So that's Resurrection.
It was the cop's head.
Okay, right.
But now she's hunting him. The tables have turned.
So
it's interesting.
We just jump off Resurrection.
It would jump off the beginning of Resurrection, but if you notice in Halloween H2O, they switched that in there. Did you notice how they were panning, doing the typical Halloween thing, which was you're following Laurie, who is being stalked by Michael, and you don't know where Michael is, and then he jumps out, but then she starts attacking back. And if you notice during that sequence with all of that scream music playing in the background, all that stuff that, got really weird, suddenly the camera's following Michael, and Laurie pops out and attacks him.
Right.
So they started toying with that whole idea there. It's an interesting concept, but the trouble is, even if they did do that, would the fans of the series be cool with you? Now we're jumping off from the beginning of another movie. We're not even jumping off from H2O. We're jumping off after the first 6 or 7 minutes of Resurrection, which is by and large the most hated movie in the entire series. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting concept, but that whole shoehorn concept of Michael not losing his head and it being the cop or the paramedic or whomever that was, that's going to be a hard place to start from, because people basically belly laughed at that. Them trying to get away with that, basically.
Well, and that was supposed to be the original ending to H2O. The original ending to H2O was supposed to be like how the beginning of Resurrection started, with showing that, it's not Michael Myers, and Michael Myers walking, it's not Michael's head under the mask when they peel it off, the decapitated head, and then they show, the Michael in the paramedic outfit walking away, and they even knew then that was a bad way to end that movie, so they didn't end it that way. Yeah. But they were like, well, here's how we can start the next one. You know what I mean?
When that final shot happened in H2O, happened with her breathing and his head's off, I remember standing up in the theater and clapping, because they had made a bold choice. Because if you look at every single one of the Halloween films, they detail, like, okay, Michael Myers got shot and then he fell down a well. Oh, in the 5th film, no, he climbs out of the well and flies and kind of sails down the river. So they were like always making you follow his journey, like from sequel to sequel, explaining how he got, to here and there. But H2O like put a stop to that, and I love that. We're talking about holes of like where things are in the Halloween series. How about that year in Halloween 5? When Michael Myers is with the old hermit, and the old hermit, I mean, they must have shared a drink or two and had a good laugh, and then a year later he stabs the hermit, but he's with him for a whole year in that little man cave. So that could be where the new film is about. Their bromance.
The bromance, I like that.
I like that. Oh man, wouldn't that be awesome? Can you imagine? You want to talk about breaking expectations? It's like them skipping and playing together and making hot pockets for each other and holding hands. Yeah. I'm sorry, dude. It's sober.
And then Michael wakes up on Halloween, puts his mask on, and kills the dude.
Roll the credit. Roll the credits.
Absolutely. Man, Don Shanks, you sure are big.
Could you imagine it'd be like the Frankenstein movie where Michael's sitting there smoking a cigar with the mountain man? He's like, good.
What do you think of the possibility of them? I mean, I don't think. What about Josh Hartnett coming back? You think they'd follow that?
Well, see, I thought about that too. When I was interpreting the Justin Beam Facebook comment as a familiar face, I was thinking, well, I mean, if it's not Jamie Lee Curtis, who else? What other familiar face would there be? And Josh Hartnett would probably do it. I mean, he participated in the extras for the Blu-ray set and did a very nice, very long interview for that. So I mean, he potentially
bring him back, and Michelle Williams.
Oh man, where's she been?
Yeah. Well, and I'm not a huge fan of H2O, but I agree with you with that ending. That was a good ending, and that was a very definitive ending. It wasn't just like she shot him a couple times and he passed out, or that awful ending to Halloween Resurrection. Oh Lord.
Oh God. There's like 4 endings on that Blu-ray.
Yeah. It was the perfect capper, and like you said, she's breathing. I love like the crane shot coming down of her, and she's holding the axe, and she's breathing, and she just kind of stares off, like that ought to do it. You know what I mean?
Punctuation.
That was a great capper. That's honestly, I mean, that's how it should have ended.
Well,
that's how
because
it
look
should
at
have
it. You have Alice in Friday the 13th, right? She's unceremoniously dispatched in the first minutes of part 2. You have Nancy Thompson, who's just killed the Dream Warriors. Laurie Strode actually won. She succeeded. And so then when I saw Resurrection, I was like, oh, okay. So Miramax contractually had you come back so we can kill you off. To me, the Laurie Strode, Michael Myers story ends with H2O. It's just done. I pretend Resurrection didn't happen.
Well, I'd said earlier that I don't. It kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth when series like this try to pretend that certain installments didn't exist. I'm so perfectly happy with pretending that Halloween Resurrection never existed. As a matter of fact, you don't have to refund me. Exactly. You don't have to refund me for that. I will pay you to make that movie never have existed. I'm so fine with pretending that movie never existed.
The only time, honestly, I was ever really disappointed seeing a Halloween movie. I know that's crazy. That sounds kind of crazy to say because I saw Rob Zombie's both of his movies, and I didn't leave hating my life afterwards. I wasn't as pleased with them. I grew up watching 4 and 5, and I still think 4 is an excellent movie. 5 is a mess, but I still have a fondness for it. The only one I ever was truly disappointed with as a fan of the franchise is Resurrection. The rest of them,
and Resurrection was directed by the man who did part 2.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So that's what made the disappointment even more for me because I went with high expectations.
Halloween Resurrection came out on my birthday.
I'm sorry.
Happy birthday, me. That was
You're
a
welcome.
great birthday gift. Yeah.
From my friends at Miramax, happy birthday.
Yes, here's this turd. Happy birthday.
Well, that's why I'm really happy that this is at Blumhouse instead of with Dimension because Dimension has a real problem of, let's say you're writing a Halloween movie and then an Exorcist movie comes out and they'll say to you, okay, your script is great, but can you make it more like The Exorcist? And so you end up taking a hippopotamus and turning it into an elephant and then a camel over here. At least Blumhouse, whether they like their films or not, they get behind a small vision and they stand by it. They don't do a lot of changes, except maybe with the ending or whatever. But for the most part, they leave the people alone. They do their work. Because if this movie is made for, let's say, $5 million and it grosses 60, they're fucking happy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, and I know, and I know I'm talking up Mike Flanagan here, but Mike Flanagan's worked with Blumhouse in the past, at least on 2 of the 3 movies. So I mean, there's that relationship there, and I'm sure they give him creative control. So I mean, that's a given there with him. But let's talk about this before we wrap things up. And this is something that I talked about in my video on this subject, but it's kind of a weighted. I don't know if you can answer the question simply, but we all get excited about, or well, we get, I guess, kind of excited But my sort of cynical response to the news that, John Carpenter was back making another Halloween, he was involved in some form or fashion. There's going to be another Halloween film. At this point, I'm just kind of cynical about all the franchise movies. They're still trying to make more Halloween movies, or Friday the 13th movies. They are going to make this Halloween. This Halloween will happen. We've had all those false starts since Halloween, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, 10 years ago. This one will happen, without a doubt. I've not heard anything about any new Nightmare on Elm Street movies in a long time, but
wasn't there the Dunstan Melton, the Saw guys, right? They were going to do Halloween 3, and I guess they just got booted off. Goodbye.
Well, they lost. Dimension lost the rights.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Dimension
waited
too long.
The rights. Exactly. Yeah. Same thing that's fixing to happen with Paramount and Friday the 13th. But I just, people like us who grew up with those series and watched them as kids, and we have such, I think you said it, Cameron. They or Andrew. They tickle the nostalgia. They tickle that nostalgia funny bone. But the movies that they make today, they're just not the same. And nostalgia is a big part of why they're making them. But the movies themselves, the final products, they're not the same. And I can't get excited for a movie called Friday the 13th that may have Jason in it, but it's not going to be anything like the Friday the 13th I grew up with. It's going to be, it's going to be the remake. You know what I mean? Yeah. Same thing with Halloween. It's going to be, it's not going to be the same. It's just going to be different. So I can't get excited about just a movie with a familiar title and a familiar character, even a familiar name attached, because it's just, it's.
The horror movies today are haunted house movies. It's just a boo scare every few minutes. The movies we're talking about actually, like Halloween. I mean, it's almost 45 minutes before something really happens after the opening scene. It's all about establishing tone and mood. And the movies today, they don't really do that a lot. So, it's just, and they flake on the characterization. There's no real mood, and it's just a boo scare every 5 seconds. And so it's hard to get behind it and feel like a kinship with these movies because they don't really let you in. They're just there to make you jump and laugh, and then it's over, and you go, okay. And the next one jumps and laughs. There's no like real continuity. I mean, Paranormal Activity, whether you like those movies or not, at least they tried to create a storyline. As small as it may be, there is a story to kind of follow, which a lot of these other movies don't do. So.
They don't establish kids very well, teenagers very well in movies either. I mean, one thing you could say about the Friday the 13th movies was that they do establish, they may be caricatures of teenagers from the 80s, but they are definitely teenagers from the 80s. They aren't models. They aren't perfect looking. Most of the time, they're not 35-year-olds playing 18. They don't do that very well, and even though the girls in Halloween were a little bit older when they filmed the movie, they were very believable teenage girls. The Deborah Hill dialogue for them, as corny as it may be with all the totalies from Linda and all that stuff, it worked. They were believable as cheeseball little buddies together. And they don't do that well anymore. It's hard. Maybe it's because I'm not that age anymore. But I don't look at these kids and think this is how kids would act. This is how kids would react together, and I don't know. It's just hard to connect. It makes you wonder. I remember being a kid and looking out the windows in my 7th grade. I think it was a history class, and as I'd look out, I could hear the score to Halloween playing in my head. And I could see, like the title overlays over top of the schoolyard, and then, some leaves falling. Or anytime I would be in the car with my grandma, we would pass 2 roads. I'd look down from the intersection and see the street and the houses lining on either side. I can see the scene from the movie. It just felt like it could be right here in my little podunk, Ohio town. I think that personal connection, as slow as it may play, people need to let that stuff soak in a little bit. I mean, there's no reason to pass it off because it's not as high speed.
It can't all be peaks.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, like, for instance, I mean, I don't mean to harp on the Rob Zombie thing, but like when they released those stills before the movie came out, and we saw Scout Taylor Compton and Daniel Harris together as friends, and they're on the street. It was like that scene where they're walking down the sidewalk, and I was like, oh my God, the girls look right, the tone looks right. This looks like, you know, fall and Haddonfield. I was really behind it. And then you see that scene in the movie, and they're just like, hey, suck a dick, fuck you.
Yep.
And you're just like, whoa. You have the look right, the tone's right. What is this dialogue coming out of their mouth? Teenagers may talk dirty, but I mean, they were talking just as dirty as Michael's parents were in the opening scene of that movie.
I remember seeing that still you're talking about with the three girls, and I also remember seeing that still of Lori frantically running across the street with Michael behind her. And when I saw those two pictures, I thought, he's got it. He has nailed what I'm hoping to see from this movie just from seeing those stills. You're absolutely right. And then, you know, I got kind of hammered for saying that's not how kids would talk. They're like, well, have you listened to teenagers nowadays? I've listened to enough teenagers to understand that typically when they're talking with each other, they're not going for shock value. They may drop some F-bombs with each other. They may say some unsavory things to each other, but typically, unless they're around adults that they want to piss off, they're not going for shock value. They're having conversations. And
I'm around teenagers a lot because I work with teenagers. But I will tell you this. I don't care who you are. There is no young girl at age 14 or 15 waking up, going downstairs, and telling her mother that she's going to fuck a bagel. Sorry.
Yep.
It doesn't happen in life.
He's the George Lucas of the titty bar. See, we didn't need to go there. That didn't help make this character one that you liked more or believed better. And then Scout Taylor Compton gets harped on for being this horrible rendition of Laurie Strode, which I don't believe at all. I believe she worked the material she had and did the best she could with it. You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I don't mind her at all. I didn't mind her at all. My buddy Click the Co-Signer wants to draw to your attention, Cameron, that he made a comment. He said the talk about Sheriff Brackett's character was spoken about with being involved in Halloween Returns. Okay, as becoming almost obsessed, an obsessed Loomis type character. Like he was gonna, I think he's saying that the Halloween Returns storyline, the scrapped storyline, was supposed to involve Sheriff Brackett, that the Melton and Dunstan were working on before Dimension lost the rights.
I don't need him to be an obsessive type. I just think that it's so odd that he is the dominant law enforcement in the first film, is back in number 2, and then just disappears. It's almost like we need some sort of closure with that character.
Yeah. Buddy DJ Donnelly, he says, "Sorry guys, but I actually like Halloween Resurrection." Well,
there's good things in it. There's good things in it. It just doesn't work as a movie.
Yeah, you know, I won't knock you for what you like, but you know, I'm not on the Halloween Resurrection boat with you, man.
And yet we all own it on Blu-ray.
It's true. We all own it on Blu-ray.
This is true.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta tell you, I've said this before, and I'll say this again. Busta Rhymes kung-fuing Michael Myers is not only the low point of the Halloween series, it might be the low point of horror.
Yeah, and the reason why they did it, and on my opinion, I mean, I know you're not the biggest fan of H2O, but I thought LL Cool J gave a very believable, engaging performance in H2O. There's none of this trick-or-treat motherfucker stuff that we get in Resurrection, you know, or the Naomi Campbell, right? Like, what the hell? It's all this supermodel stuff doing in the movie, too. I don't get it.
Playing to trends, though. I mean, at this point, you know, the found footage thing had taken off with Blair Witch. Didn't like America's Top Model become popular during that era too?
Probably.
So you had these reality shows with models on them, and this again reality TV show theme that they were playing to trends, just playing to trends and saying, hey, let's see if this will work for Halloween. And
but what
it just didn't.
The ending of Resurrection, right? They have him in the ambulance and his eyes open up, and I remember in the theater going, "That's the ending you're gonna go with?" And then when I saw that there were alternate endings on the DVD before obviously it became the Blu-ray, I remember watching all those endings, and they got worse and worse with every single one I watched. It's like you guys couldn't even come up with well, in their minds, not mine, amazing beginning to the Resurrection. I don't like Laurie saying "see in hell" and that kind of thing and falling to her death like that, but it is at least that is a well-directed sequence. That you can't believe that the director who made that sequence made the rest of Halloween Resurrection, you know.
Yeah.
Do you think that they have trouble with the endings here, and that the Steve Miner had trouble with H2O because Mustafa Akkad basically said, you can't kill this guy. You're not allowed to kill this guy. This guy must live.
Mm-hmm. Well, they still got away with her decapitating him and ending the movie with that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, I think that was the ending. You know, Mustafa Akkad was Mustafa Akkad, but you know, he was playing ball on the Weinstein's court with H2O, and they own all the balls, or they used to own all the balls. Put it that way. So, and we can thank Malik Akkad for Busta Rhymes being cast in Resurrection because back in the day he was listening to a lot of Busta Rhymes, and so that was yeah.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thanks a lot, dude. You got crappy tasted music, and anyway, we won't beat a dead horse. But well, guys, why don't we go ahead and call it a night? We've been going for an hour and a half, and this is a topic I'm sure we could probably talk another hour and a half easily on. But yeah, so John Carpenter's Halloween 2017. We'll know more soon as far as how serious they're going to take the movie when they announce, you know, who's writing it, when they announce who's directing it, and all those things should be coming up in the very near future because they've already got a release date for the movie, which is Halloween 2017. So it's coming out next year, and I'm cautiously optimistic, and that's what I would stress to everyone out there. Don't get overhyped. Don't get super stoked. You know, wait, see how serious they're taking it, and be cautiously optimistic. So.
And I would say if you guys like this video, be sure to share it with a lot of people because even if I wasn't on this video, I think that the conversation between Idle Chatter and Piz out here is almost like this is the definitive John Carpenter discussion right now that's happening on the internet, and I watch so many YouTube channels. This conversation needs to be heard by horror fans all over because we all need to weigh in on this because collectively we may be able to let Blumhouse know a direction we want to see. So.
Good point. Very good.
Very good point, yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Cameron, for joining me tonight to talk about the topic at hand here. It's always a pleasure hanging out with you guys.
Thanks,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thanks to everybody at home who tuned in and watched, and everybody who left comments and questions and all that. It was a lot of fun. We appreciate it. And just keep the discussion going. Tell us what your hopes for Halloween 2017 in the comment section of this video. And yeah, so you guys out there have a great night. Have a great, safe Memorial Day weekend, and we'll see you later. Peace.
Thanks.
Bye.